The premise for the baby proposal sounded like something I would like, primarily because our protagonists are hosting a morning show, and that's something that I kind of enjoy. And to be honest, it started off well, and then it just became quite ridiculous. Now, I'm not going to spoil anything, but I will say if you like even the tiniest bit of reality in your films that are meant to be realistic, it's not a fantasy film, um, then this is probably going to irritate you. It was released in 2019, directed by Richmond, and stars Alexandra Chando as Layla and Mike Merrill as Derrick. They are the hosts of, well, the co-hosts of a morning show, and it seems like it's going to be an interesting journey. They're both up together as a team for another position, quite exciting times ahead. And then one day they are given a baby, and they have to try and care for this baby and work together because they're kind of at loggerheads quite a lot, even though they're meant to be a team. They do kind of get at each other, and they have to kind of share custody of this child while they work out what to do with this child and what the future is for this child. And that sounds interesting. And I will admit that it was relatively interesting to watch them working together, overcoming problems. That's fine. But the way in which they were given this child is so ridiculous. Now, I'm not saying I wanted paperwork, I wanted, depressive content that looked into how the baby's parents died or the baby's mother died. But basically, this baby became an orphan and was left in the custody of that person's elderly neighbour. So the baby's mother died, the elderly neighbour had custody of the child. But the elderly neighbour decided that she was, too old to look after this child. She just wasn't up for it. So she just turned up at the studio one day because she's a fan of the show, gave them the baby, and said, I think you two would be better as having joint custody of this child. Here you go. And that was it. No information with the authorities, no paperwork at all. You can't just hand over custody of a child, even less so to somebody you've actually never met. I just thought it was so ridiculous and so not thought through. Yes, I can suspend disbelief with these kinds of films. I don't expect everything to be 100% correct, but at least think through what you're suggesting is happening here. It would have made more sense if, for example, one of the two co-hosts had lost a relative or somebody close to them and they had to then take custody of the child, but they had to have the child in the studio and the other person had to help out. I don't know, that wouldn't have been quite as dramatic, but it would have made a modicum of sense. I just became so frustrated by how poorly thought out this narrative was. It's like they don't even know anything about child custody or what happens if a child becomes an orphan. You can't just give the baby to somebody. It became absolutely ludicrous, completely not thought through, and from that point I lost trust in everything they were doing because I didn't believe they knew what they were talking about. I didn't believe anything in this had been researched, and I like to watch films for educational aspects, so I was looking at things like how the morning show would have been run, what the audition process would have been like for their next job. I didn't believe anything they were telling me because I thought if you can't get that simple thing at least slightly correct, I don't believe anything else. The acting was very good. The casting is very good. Our two protagonists on screen work very well together. I really enjoyed that. I have no issues with the directing. Soundtrack or music didn't stand out to me, but obviously that means it wasn't a problem. The development of the narrative, the pacing is absolutely fine. It's just the narrative itself is absolutely insane, and I don't understand why they ever thought it would be such a good idea to just have somebody give a baby away. Like, if you're going to, they could have done this with just a tiny bit more effort. It's not like they just had to brush it aside and get over it. It was very poorly thought out. It could have been interesting, but the baby proposal was a massive disappointment.